Hi, I'm John Frazier, the pastor at Christian Faith Assembly. We're a full gospel Reformed church that has the love of the brethren and endeavoring to minister to the lost. We meet in the Old Brick Church on Route 2 in Woolston, Vermont, every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. If you're in the area, check us out. Or also check out our website. Now I'm continuing where we left off last week. So get your Bibles and we'll get started. If this is saying, could there ever be injustice with God? Absolutely not. It's not. It's so strong, it's unthinkable. See, when people say, well, look at these people, they weren't even born yet. They weren't even done anything good or evil, and he chose Jacob and he didn't choose Esau? That's why Paul asked the rhetorical question. Can there be any injustice with God? Absolutely not. Is his mind different than ours? He's not thinking like we're thinking? It looks like it's not fair. Isn't that true? Yeah. That's why, see, Arminians are basically humanists, and they go in that direction, so they try to take their theology and wrap it around these words to make it more palatable. And they're distorting the Word of God by doing it. Now, I want you to think about something. Put your thinking caps on. Why do you suppose Paul asked this rhetorical question? I'll give you a moment to think about it. See, Paul's a teacher, and when teachers teach, they know going into their lesson, there'll be difficulty with students understanding. I mean, that's true. A good teacher anticipates his opposition. A good teacher does that. He doesn't teach it for himself. He thinks about what's the opposition going to be like. When I teach, I sort of know what you might scratch your head about, that I bring forth. If I bring forth something that maybe you haven't heard before, or that might be controversial, or I know Romans 9 is one of the most difficult passages. I have avoided that for a long time because it's not the easiest passage to teach. But a good teacher will think about that. And I know most of the time, I know where the problems will arise. And I'm sure Paul, as a teacher, with what he's spoken, is anticipating a protest. And let's face it, the things he said so far are not something that takes place in our everyday understanding. Isn't that true? It's like trying to understand how there was never a time that God didn't exist. God is an uncaused cause. Did you ever think about that? Everything we know about in the universe has a cause and effect. Everything that's caused by something else. God is an uncaused cause. That's alien to our thinking, based on what we've experienced. Isn't that true? There was never a time there wasn't a God. But what I'm saying is that's a difficult concept. These things are alien to the natural man. So, it's totally alien to anything we know in this universe. Can you explain that to me at all? Were you ever taught something like that in this world? No, of course not. So that's why Paul knows it's not something that you've heard before in a way that you can absorb it and try to understand it in some rational way. It's alien. And we know that even most Christians have a problem with these concepts. So Paul knows and anticipates a protest. That's why he says, because of what they may be thinking, is there any unrighteousness with God? Because right away that's what you might think. God's choosing this one before he even knows what's going to happen to him or anything else, before he did good or evil, before he was even born. He's picking this one and not that one. I mean, how's he making that choice? Well, anyways, before I even go there, it's like, could God do something that was wrong or not just? Why does he do that? I'm trying to have you think about it. Because he knows and anticipates people are going to say, and you know what they're going to say? Say it for me. That's it. Say it. Come on, say it with me. That's not fair. Right? That's what they would say. See, the Arminians say that all the time. That's not fair. So my question again to you is, why does he anticipate that objection? Now, I've already cited some reasons, but to be more formal, I have to believe that Paul, being of an Augustinian persuasion, I just want to reinforce Augustine's position with us, okay? In any case, Paul, because he had this position, he had experience teaching the doctrine of predestination, where every time the subject is mentioned, the initial response of the people is, that's not fair. They would say that's not fair. Don't you agree? Anyways, I feel very confident that that's why Paul raises this rhetorical question. Think about this now. Nobody ever raises this question about the Arminian view. Have you ever heard anybody raise that question about the Arminian view or semi-Pelagian view? No. You know why? Because it's humanistic and it fits the mentality. That's why. It fits the humanistic mentality. Because, see, God didn't choose them before they did good or evil. He waited till he saw what they're going to do and then picked them. So they had something to do with it, and that would make it all fair. I mean, it's true. That's why there's no objection to the Arminian view. I hope you guys are seeing this real clearly. I want to make a real point of this, so there'll never be a question in your mind again. If you're like me and believe in the Augustinian view like Paul espoused, then you should take comfort that the same questions that are raised in our view of predestination are the same ones that Paul had to deal with. And if you go out and you start telling people, preaching this here and there, you're going to find you're going to get that same objection. So is there unrighteousness with God because of on the surface it sounds like it, right? It sounds like it. And when you talk about divine sovereign choice before anyone has done good or evil, without considering their future actions, this is strictly due to the sovereign purpose of God. And that's God's sovereign purposes might be seen by grace and not by human works. And then the obvious question is, that's going to be asked, how can that be fair? And then Paul says, is there unrighteousness with God? And his answer, may it never be so. Absolutely not. There's no unrighteousness with him. And remember, he says to Moses, look at verse 15. What's he say to Moses? I will have mercy on whom I will have mercy, and I'll have compassion on whom I will have compassion. So let's just speculate a little bit here now, okay? Let's just speculate about this. If I was the apostle, and I was teaching an Arminian foreknowledge view of election, and I had these objections to deal with, what would I fall back on? If I was going to pull the plug on any charge of God being unfair, I would say, wait a minute. God is not unfair or unjust. We know that part. Remember, even though his decision is done before anyone had done good or evil, it's to view of, it's to a view of their future choices. Yet Paul didn't do that. Instead, he falls back on what? He falls back on the divine prerogative of God to exercise mercy on whom he'll have mercy. That's why verse 15 is there. He didn't go back and say, well, he's going to do it because of, they're going to make a choice and he's going to see what they're going to choose and then he's going to select them. No, he just says he's going to have mercy on whom he'll have mercy. And the whole point of the passage is that some people receive a measure of mercy that others don't. Let's get a little hairy here now. That's why he quotes Moses. And that's the final point of his argument. Can we all agree that no one ever receives injustice at the hands of God? Do you really believe that in your heart? God is righteous. There's never any injustice with God. So what he's done, because he loves Jacob and hates Esau, even though it seems like that isn't fair, we know there's no injustice with God. So somehow we got to bridge those two, don't we? Because even though Esau is not selected as an object of divine mercy, and yet Jacob is, what's making that choice? This is not injustice against Esau, according to what we know, because God is not, there's no injustice with God, so it can't be injustice against Esau. Because Esau, even before he is born, is known by God as what? A fallen person. Isn't that true? Esau is a fallen person. Even before he's born, we know that. But that's why I said to you last week that I don't know of any child I've ever known that you have to teach them to be bad. They just always go against your rules, no matter what. Isn't that true? Anybody that has children know that. They've taken the brunt of the fall, of the fall of Adam and Eve, because we were in his loins. So, he knew Esau was a fallen person before he was born. Because when God does his electing, he always does it in the light of the fall. Now listen to me. He always does it. This is a very good principle. You might run it down. Write it down. He always elects in light of the fall. God only chooses fallen sinners for salvation. He's not going to choose someone who's already saved or doesn't need salvation, right? Otherwise, like I said, there wouldn't be a need for election. It would be a waste of time to elect people who don't need salvation. So the whole process of election is in the view of a fallen human race. Now, stay with me because we're going to answer the question here. When God considers the whole world, he knows the whole world is fallen. He knows if he just gave justice, what would happen if he just gave justice? All would perish. All would perish. If God would only exercise justice to a fallen race, everyone would perish. And if justice means, I'll just give you what you deserve. There's no injustice in God. If he gives you justice, you can't fault that. But God chooses to grant mercy to some. Now, Jacob received mercy, Esau received justice. Now, is there anything wrong with that? I ask you. Now, we say that it isn't fair. What we mean by that, listen to this now, you can write this down. What we mean by when we say it isn't fair, when we understand the whole theology of this, we say it isn't equal. That's what it is. It isn't equal. So I think what lurks in our mind is if God is going to be gracious where we have two men who are both guilty and they're under the sentence of death, and God is gracious to this one, shouldn't he be gracious to the other one? That's what lurks in the back of our mind. Isn't that true? Is it fair for the governor, for instance, to grant executive privilege to one prisoner and not to another? It surely isn't equal, I grant you that. But again, that person receives grace, and that one, or mercy, and that one receives justice. Actually, the one who receives justice has nothing which he has any rights to complain about. Esau can't.
You're listening to Radio Pan Am. Brought to you by Pan American Broadcasting, when your ministry has to make an impact. If you enjoyed today's broadcast, please email us at info@panambc.com. Again, that's info@panambc.com. For more information, visit our website, panamericanbroadcasting.com.